Greetings, folks, and welcome to another Facebook presentation from your National Naval Aviation Museum, produced by our brothers and sisters at Hellcat Productions, headquartered right here in Pensacola, Florida. 30 years ago this month, the United States military and our coalition allies kicked off Operation Desert Storm with the mission to expel Iraqi forces from the small neighboring country of Kuwait, which Saddam Hussein previously invaded on 2 August 1990. Beginning on 17 January 1991, the operation commenced with one of the most intense aerial campaigns in modern military history. Today, we are thrilled to share with you a significant event from the very first day of that conflict, the successful engagement of 2 Iraqi MiG-21s by Navy F-18 strike fighters from the Sunliners of VFA-81, flying from the aircraft carrier Saratoga. Here to discuss that engagement are the pilots of those Sunliner jets, Vice Admiral Mark Mert Fox, United States Navy retired, who at the time was a lieutenant commander, and as a lieutenant wingman, now retired Captain Nick Mongo Mongillo. Moderating the discussion is current Sunliner pilot Lieutenant Russell Simmons, call sign Hotcakes, who was kind enough to take a break from flying modern Block II Super Hornets out of NES Oceana to join us here today. Take it away, Hotcakes.
Well, we're going to share with you the video next. Next slide, I'll do a HUD fan before we switch to the video. Next, there we go. So what you'll see, everything is going to be through the heads-up display of the F-18. Some of it's intuitive. I'll give you a quick fan. The 350 is calibrated airspeed. The altitude, 33,500. You can see up at the top is a compass rose, so it's headed north. This is almost an actual shot from duplicating the HUD. The numbers on the left side, about midway down, you'll see the alpha. That's angle of attack. M is Mach. So if you're curious, what's the Mach? About 0.9, 0.95, and then G is the G-force that plane is under right now. The time, the local time, is down in the bottom left. The bottom right, 31.3, that's the distance to the target. That's W1 is waypoint 1. In the center, it looks like a little airplane. That is called a velocity vector. And if you're in a climb, it'll be at the solid number 5. You can see there with the line. If it's in the descent, it's the dotted 5 and the dotted 10. So that's why you can tell if the airplane's level or climbing or descending. When you're in the ear-to-ear mode, you'll have that big, large circle in the middle. When you're in ear-to-ground, that will not be there, and you'll see both of those modes. When you have a radar lock, you will see that box. That's a TD box, a target designator box with the shoot cue over it. That is where the bad guy is that you might be able to see. Shoot cue is telling you, for this version of Hornet, that if you fire, you have a very good chance of that missile hitting that airplane. For some later versions, depending on how you have a program, it could be where ROE is met. You see 1090 VC, that's a knots enclosure, velocity closure. 7.3 is range, and that will be counting down, and 5 TTG is time to go. That's how long the missile will take once it launches to impact the target. So if we can go ahead and change over to the other where we have the video ready to go. The first will be Mark's video, and it's a little longer, it's a little cleaner than mine, and you'll get a chance to hear the MiGs are running on the TOAD. Battle Axe is the JFK aircraft. When we get to my HUD tape, you'll hear a lot of RWR indications, and that's because I had a self-spiking problem on my aircraft. After Mark's plays, then radar warning receiver, thank you. Okay, it's and then after Mertz plays, then you'll be mine. My tape's a little bit darker, but it's good enough to view. And the total video time's about 5.5, 6 minutes.
Bandit 260, 20 miles. You got an additional Bandit 245, 11 miles, southwestbound, low.
Walleyes and Bandits on your 150 for 8 miles westbound.
Aircraft at 22530 from Bandit is hot on you.
304, both Bandit 003, 13 miles nose high.
14 hot. Hot on the aircraft 23530 from Mady.
304 at you. Book Bandit is east at 3. East at 3.
Those are the tall droppers.
Okay, conning, maggot, conning.
Contrails.
That's it.
And it faded last position, Mady 23017, southwest bound.
All that Bandit's hot on you. Bogey up. All the Bandits on your 090 now for 6 miles westbound. So, you're conning again.
And 22018, Mady, maneuvering.
Yeah, burner hot, 6. Bandit, 230, 30 miles. Of a contrail at our left, well, 10 o'clock, a little high. Should be no harm. Should be harm. Yeah. We're coming out, we're coming out. You're conning again, Maggot. Bandit, 040, 12 miles. Maggot, you're conning. All battle after clearance south, Manny, 11055. You guys are both conning.
New picture, Bandit 19020, Mady.
Take fighter wing, Mongo, not spread. Fighter wing. Get out of my way.
Air to ground selected.
You see how it's flashing over there to the right? There's a huge jet stream that's blowing my flight path to the right.
Bandit Mady 18525, southbound.
That Bandit's on your nose at 15.
Well, Shazam.
200 radar contact on my nose, Mach at 28,000.
Aircraft in position 17035.
200 bogey on the nose, 28,000, 7 miles. Take 21. EID.
I just took the shot.
Trail section, stand by for BID. Coming down my nose, both side, Mach.
Sparrow shot.
Good shit,
Sidewinder hit. Sparrow hit.
That's a MiG-21. That's a MiG-21. Yep, that's confirms. Splash forward! Box 2. Answer's Taylor 1 on the nose or locked up on 1 on the nose. 23,000 feet, point 4. That's Taylor. Oh, it's no lock. Continue the call.
New picture, Bandit 19020, Mady.
Take fighter wing, Mongo, not spread.
This is Mongo's tape now.
Bandit Mady 18525, southbound.
That Bandit's on your nose, 15. Radar contact on my nose, Mach at 28,000.
17035.
200 bogey on the nose, 28,000, 7 miles. Take 21. EID. Mongo's locked. That's in the area. Trail section, stand by for BID. Coming down my nose, both side, Mach. Bouncer. Mongo Stat 1. Good sniff, MiG-21. Kill. Fox 1, MiG-21 low. It's a MiG-21. That's confirmed. Fox 2.
If we can go back to the PowerPoint,
Answer
please.
Staley 1 on the nose or locked up on one of the nose. 23,000 feet, point 4. That's close. Pilots no lock. Continue the calls.
But we have just another couple of slides to wind up the presentation, probably get into more of the panel and any Q&A from the audience.
As the slides are getting sorted out there, something that I noticed from the controller there, it started out very standardized comm, as we would say it, and then it eventually broke down into what we call trucker comm, where it's just plain language when standardization kind of goes out the window and we need to get your attention. How did that play into your decision-making matrix to realize that that bandit was off your nose?
Well, I'd had a hard time correlating the broadcast bullseye. And in my mind, especially when I'd heard, hey, you've had a merge, 304, he's east at 3. I mean, there was just a lot of activity over there to the west, to the left. And so in my mind's eye, I'd kind of put that off to the side. And then when he came up and made the dynamite call of 400, that bandit's on your nose at 15, I knew who 400 was. He was right over there in mile beam. And that was what put me into the mindset of like, okay, that bandit is on your nose. We had mechanically scanned array radars. And so I was a low looker. And I was happy to be a low looker because I thought that would be where any bad guys would come from. But as it turns out, these guys were almost co-altitude.
Well, we'll fast forward 25 years, and really it's now 30 years, right? This deck's a few years dated. We never left the Mideast, and I explained my view of the world order. I don't think we're going to be leaving anywhere, and you folks will be taking up the tip of the spear shortly. I returned to OSW in 97, 98. And then Gulf War II, OEF in 06. Mert would talk to you about his visit. So he led day one or night one of OEF when we went back the second time. But we have been involved in the Mideast since then. Slide. And 9/11 just reaffirmed the world order and the way we are. And there's no doubt had the terrorists had nuclear weapons, they would just as well vaporize New York City than take out the Twin Towers. And so we've been postured overseas now for decades. Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria. We have tensions with Iran. And so naval aviation is going to be in demand. Mert, let's go to the next slide. And Mert, let's have you catch us up on how many times you went back and some of your thoughts before I bring us to the last slide.
So we completed the Desert Storm cruise in 1991. I came back, interestingly enough, I was XO of the same squadron I'd been a department head in, so I was on Saratoga. I was flying the same lot airplanes with some of the troops, certainly the same faces, not any of the aircrew. But I flew over Bosnia-Herzegovina in the Balkans, and then ultimately we wound up going back, and I flew several deployments as XOCO in Operation Southern Watch in the 95, 96 time frame. And then I wound up, when I became a CAG, I was on Connie when 9/11 occurred, and then we did a quick turnaround and we redeployed. We had about a 13-month turnaround from about the 9/11 time frame when we were getting back until we went back to the Middle East, and then I was the overall mission commander and strike lead for the opening strike of Iraqi freedom. And so the big changes, Mongo's already alluded to it, we are so much more disciplined, we are so much more rigorous in our training and our standardization. We've come eons from where we were in Desert Storm. The other big change is our ability to operate at night. In the single-seat world, we weren't flying with goggles back in 1990, 91 time frame. Into the mid and late 90s, and thereafter we started flying with night vision goggles, night devices. And then the other really big change was the advent of precision munitions that we carried, GPS, the JDAMs, and laser-guided bombs. And so we are much more lethal. We were much more capable. In Desert Storm, we were talking about how many sorties per target because you're dropping dumb bombs. The vast majority of the ordnance that we delivered in Desert Storm was a dumb bomb, except for the walleyes and the high-speed anti-radiation missiles. Flash forward to 2003. In March, I only expended precision-guided munitions of JDAMs, laser-guided munitions, and Mavericks, LMAVs. So big changes. Mongo also touched on the fact that our opponents have been watching what we do and how we do it. So if there was anything that somebody that watched Desert Storm would learn, would be don't give the Americans 6 months to build a mountain of ordnance and munitions and people to be able to go in there and open the new can of whip-ass. And then in the Iraqi freedom, don't give them 4 weeks, because we were kind of doing an in-stride acceleration to exercise that campaign. So it's the Chinese in particular have watched with a great deal of interest in the way that our tactics and our operations have been executed, and they've learned. So we won't have 6 months. We won't have 6 weeks. We've got to be prepared. And I know, I look out in this audience and I know that we've got the people that have got the ability and the motivation to be able to meet that challenge, but you will have challenges ahead and you will write your own chapter in history. Lord willing, we won't have a conflict with China, but the best way to prevent one is to be prepared for it.
It's a great segue into the final slide.
That wasn't my Capri Sun, by the way.
That when you're over there supporting your folks on the ground, many times you're flying, you're not dropping. You're just there in case there's a tick, troops in contact. We are in a great power competition. Our defense strategy is built upon it. We recognize that with the resurgent Russia, all right? They run hard times when they disbanded, but they're rebuilding. And then China. China, with large population, high-tech, modernization, they watch. And the Chinese, they play the long game. They've been around thousands of years. And, you know, Mongo's opinion, they're not building their military to dominate the world, but just like us, they want a military that's strong to protect them, influence, like we have our military to influence, protect, but make no doubt about it, they would like to be the #1 nation. We all do, right? That's in everyone's DNA, and they want to do that in the economic front. However, they want to have a strong military just in case it comes to that. And they've watched how we built our military and how we waged war, and they're building theirs to counter that. So hopefully, as this goes forward, we can both deter each other. We can come to some better economic agreement as nations and just coexist, and then we just go on. I mean, that's it. But recognizing where you are is probably very important. And it took us a while as a nation. We were still in the peace dividend for a while and focused on the Mideast while Asia and Russia and China watched us bleed. The next slide is just a cool slide to end on. So that's from a debt to Germany to fight the German MiGs. These are not the Soviet-type Eastern Bloc. When the wall came down in 91, USSR, Russia took back most of their assets, but they let East Germany, when they merged with West Germany, keep one squadron of MiG-29s, and they became NATO's aggressors for about a decade. And we did a debt from Cecil Field, Florida, over to Germany for 2 weeks and fought them. How much fun is that? And there's some HUD footage of a MiG underneath the pipper of an F-18. So with that, over to Mert and over to our panel questionnaire.
Well, thanks for that presentation, guys. That was outstanding. I do have a couple questions as we'll dive back into kind of some phases from the beginning. Mongo, you alluded to the fact that you were a new guy, and I think that any young JO or junior officer has obviously been a new guy in recent times that has not seen themselves going across the beach or doing anything getting a green ink or combat time in their logbook, as we say. How did you get on the day one go? I know you're a Skedzo at the time, or a Schedules officer. The OPSO was sitting right here. It smells a little bit like collusion. But how did you get into the day one strike?
Night one was supposed to be, and it was the harder mission, night and seed. Maggot was leading day one all the time, and I was sort of his, butt boy, strike planner, do whatever he needed. So I was always on his planning team, and kind of by virtue of a junior guy is always number two. I was close to Maggot. I was kind of with him. I think Dizzy led the whole strike, but Maggot was sort of the sunliner lead of it. I just sort of showed up there, and I stayed there throughout all the mirror image strikes. And when you're doing sustained combat operations, which we knew there was going to be a fairly long air war, you can't cherry pick your team. When I engaged in some contingency strike planning, like one-time punitive strike, you can cherry pick your A team. You can have your COXO, department head, your Top Gun patch wearers, and load the team. But when you're doing day, night, everybody has to participate. So you start mixing your talent. Your experienced and inexperienced is number 2 or number 4. So just by virtue of those, I happened to show up on day one, and I'm happy I was.
That's awesome. And Mert, you had full faith and confidence in your new Nugget going out there and putting GBU-34s on target?
Yeah, we actually received, Donor got there, in December, right?
Donor got there in
Call sign
December.
Donor, brain donor.
Yeah, it's a brain donor.
Great guy. So we had some nuggets that actually showed up even after Mongo got here. And so we didn't throw them into the toughest ones first, but as Mongo was talking, you actually, when you go into sustained combat, it's not the airplane availability or the flight deck, it's the aircrew availability that's the limiting factor. And so you need everybody on the team, and you need, there were a couple of guys that were, you still got green ink to do a Red Sea combat air patrol, and there was no real threat in the Red Sea, and it's like, nope, everybody's going to have a chance to go feet dry, everybody's going to have an opportunity to be shot at, and as the OPSO, I was just pretty unyielding about everybody is going to, I'm going to do everything I can to make this as fair and as even and distributed as I can, with the asterisk that you always know that the guys that have got the unique quals, the COXO and the department heads, typically will have more leadership responsibilities airborne, and so therefore there may be some small inequities. But I was really working very hard to just keep this in absolutely. I didn't want any seagulls. I didn't want any cowboys. I wanted to have everybody on the team, and you have your opportunity.
You spoke a lot about the transition from air to air to air to ground, and how there was delineated mileage, about 30 or 35 nautical miles. You say we call that a decision point now, where you make the transition from the air to air mindset to the air to surface mindset. While as a parent from the HUD tapes, and as we know as aviators, that's as simple as a push of the button. But can you talk about the mental stressors that levied on you, going from, okay, now I'm complete with the air picture, I'm going to focus on putting my bombs on target, and now I'm going back to the air picture, and how that sort of played out?
Back then, the transition point wasn't well defined for the community. And if you think about our mission was to drop bombs, and this is not a hit among the A7 community. They were fabulous dropping bombs, but the mindset was, we're there to drop bombs. Let's get in that air-to-ground mode far enough out that we make sure master arms on, make sure our racks unlock. It was a different mindset. But as you saw, we changed it and learned on day one. And for dropping dumb bombs, the transition point is typically almost at rolling, all right, nowadays, right? You back it up for LGBs, and that became codified in the way the weapons school teaches it and was pushed out. So at the time, it wasn't bad. It's what we did. It's what the lead briefed, and you did. You switched the buttons, but we learned. We no longer did it at 30 miles out, believe me, even on day 2, day 3, day 4. So it wasn't bad. And the community got much smarter, and so all those points became second nature, just like you're spouting off exactly what it is that's been defined and trained to. So for me, it wasn't stressful. It's what we did and what we learned from and how we move forward.
I got to know about the RTB, the return to base, or heading home from the ship. So not only have you just gotten one air-to-air kill apiece, you went and put your bombs on target, on time, and now you're headed back to the boat, which is no easy task, especially, well, PLM modes or precision landing modes nowadays makes it a lot easier, but back then it was all manual ball flying. Oh, by the way, it's at night. Oh, by the way, I'm in a Legacy Hornet that's low on gas. Oh, by the way, I'm all amped up from the mission that I just executed. How did you compartmentalize that, and how was that last pass getting aboard?
I'll let Mert answer, but an attack end was off for 8 months. We never had a tack end to even find the ship.
Well, there's a couple of things. One is, so I was the one guy out of this whole formation that did not have the little jamming pod designed to counter the SA-6 threat, because I was the spare and they'd run out of these ALQ-167 pods, so they just slapped a fourth Mark 84 on my jet. So I was well aware of the fact that I was the only person in this formation without that Klingon cloaking device. So as we came off target, and I was very familiar with the Sunliner brief, so Maggot and Mongo are here, they're coming off like this, and I scooted in right between them. So, I mean, it was one of these, I want to have some sort of SA-6 protection here as we come off target. And we went supersonic coming out of country. So we were hustling, we were climbing. So I had a low fuel light by the time I got to the tanker. And we had checked each other over. And once we got south of the border, and we're now joining up and looking at each other, and only Mongo's missing any air-to-air ordnance. Nobody's got any holes in the jets. Everybody else, Maggot and Bouncer, both have got all their missiles, and so I have this little, it's the little angel and devil kind of thing on my shoulder. It's like, that Sidewinder worked. You got a MiG kill. And they're like, you're going to bolt her. And so all the way back to the ship, well, to back up. So I come up to I join up on the tanker. It sounds more dramatic than it really was. I had, I think, 1,600 pounds by the time I got to the tanker. But we were right over a RAR. So there was a divert field down there. If I couldn't have gotten into the tanker, I could have just swirled down. But if I want to impress people or make it sound more dramatic, I had 1,500 or 1,600 pounds by the time I got to the tanker. But the Air Force KC-135s, there's a little boom operator in there, and this guy's sitting here, and he's jazzing. I mean, he is so stoked. I'm missing a Sidewinder on this station and a Sparrow on that, and he's doing the moonwalk practically, and I'm saying, it's good. I appreciate it. Just keep the boom steady, and I'll get in. But all the way back to the ship, I kind of went through this, you got a MiG kill, you're going to bolt her. And so I'm happy to report that, number one, I got aboard on the first pass. I didn't bolt her. I didn't get an ace. It finally took a conflict for paddles to kind of open up that okay window that it should have always been there in terms of, hey, you know what? You didn't scare me. It was a good pass. That wasn't okay. I had the best run of okays during Desert Storm of any other time in my life.
Yeah, for me, coming back, the landing was, I was never the best guy, but I always got aboard pretty much first time safely. I didn't sleep for 3 days. I didn't sleep much the night before the mission because I was nervous. And then I was on the adrenaline rush of the shoot down. And then I was flying the next day on a dedicated MiG sweep mission called MiG sweep before it was OCA. We changed the names with the Air Force back in the 90s, but for us it was a MiG sweep. And just the adrenaline rush of combat, maybe 4 or 8 hours sleep over a 3-day period. Exciting time. You're going to be, if war's exciting.
So the asterisk to that is, so we're debriefing down in Civic, and Mongo and I are looking at each other's tape, and now I'm confirmed. Yep, that little smoke trail, you can see a little pencil smoke trail of my Sidewinder. And the CO of the ship was a guy named Joe Mobley. He was an A6BN who had been a POW back in Vietnam, a marvelous, just a gem of a man. And he's giving me a little hard time. He's going, well, Mert, you put a Sparrow into a burning MiG. Man, those Sparrows are expensive. I said, hey, Skipper, start the allotment. I'll pay for it. I just wanted to be sure. And so we're kind of shucking and jiving there in the Civic after this is over. And two things stand out. One is, I remember being in the passageway outside Civic, saying to Mongo, listen, Mongo, don't ever forget how screwed up and how far behind the airplanes we are. If we ever hear each other talking about how well suitcased I had this thing. You know, I'm going to come punch you in the nose, or you come punch me, because we've got to let people know that we were just hanging on by our fingertips. But the other thing was they were setting up Civic now for the next brief, and I'm a harm shooter. I'm the harm element lead for this evening strike, so I had a chance to turn right around. I grabbed a quick bite, and then I came back up and briefed, and this was for the A6s going low. They were going low against H3 tonight. And the XO of the A6 squadron, the strike lead, he's going, okay, and we're going to do this, and we're going to, you know, the primary target is this hangar. And I said, XO, I put 4 Mark 84s on this afternoon. I saw him hit. And he goes, it doesn't matter. We've already got our offsets made. And, blah, blah, blah. And so one of the lessons learned from the A6 community's decision to do that, you think that the hardest thing that you do in peacetime training will be what you're going to do in combat. And for the A6 community, flying low at night is the hardest thing that they did. And so they were thinking, okay, that's what we're going to do. Well, the first night of the war, they stayed high and nobody got shot. And then the second night of the war, they decided, and it's over baked pizza crust terrain. There is no terrain masking. There was no mountainous terrain. They were just over the desert, and it turned out really poorly for them. So just because you train to something and it's hard in peacetime doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to use that in combat. Any questions from out in the crowd here?
Anything from young aspiring aviators?
Yes, ma'am. Shout it out and I'll repeat it. So the question is, did we have any second thoughts or questions about whether or not we had done the right thing or executed the mission the way that we wanted to? Is that what you mean? I had no problem sleeping. You may have been pumped up, but after 2 hops, I came back on an adrenaline high, and I felt like I could have probably flown a third one. But there were a group of reporters that came out to Saratoga, and Mongo and I both said, we don't want to talk to them. There's just a good way to get yourself into trouble. And the big XO finally persuaded us that it would be a good thing. But the first question that Christian Amopour asked me was, well, how do you feel about the loss of your squadron mate? That was the first. They wanted you to emote. And I said, well, as far as I'm concerned, he's out in the desert really pissed off because his radio's not working and he's picking sand fleas out of his shorts. And then her second question was, well, tell me, what's it feel like to kill another man? And I said, I had no problem sleeping last night. And I didn't. And the reason is, the man that I killed was a brave man. He got into a jet, and he was going supersonic, and I've never known whether or not he was being vectored on me, and that was why he was like that, or if it was just his unlucky day. But it was one of those things where every fiber of my being was poured into that mission and being prepared to do it. And there's no time for that kind of introspection. You do need to think about big life issues, and combat means that you kill the enemy. And so I dealt with that. I'd kind of worked my way through it, and so I didn't have any problems dealing with that. And people have always wondered, you know, have you had any PTSD? Have you had any problems with that? It's like, no, I haven't had any issues with that.
From a technical side, I heard Bandit. I was confident. Maggot, by calling Bogey a VID and his seniority, had me pause shooting instead of shooting at 8 miles. So from when I had the radar lock at about 8.5 miles to when I pulled the trigger at 2.6, my gears are turning of why is nobody else shooting? I heard Bandit, correlated Bandit. He's calling it Bogey. But finally, I just said, I can't take it anymore. I'm right. He's wrong. I had no idea Mert shot, and I pulled the trigger. All right, and so, but I did go through a little bit of time, about 15 seconds of asking. The time of we were alerted that they were on our nose, they were fireballs, was 45 seconds. So not a lot of time to dwell on it. Does that answer your question?
Any other questions from the audience?
You can take your mask off just so I can hear you.
Gentlemen, you mentioned when you went to Germany as a debt against the fulcrums. How was that after training so long against a threat that there wasn't too much information on, and then finally going out against it? Were you surprised in good ways, bad ways?
So this is a great little anecdote. I walked into the skipper's office. We just got back from deployment, OSW, and I was OPSO. So I was MERT now, fast forward 5 years, flying brand new Lot 18s. So brand new Lot 10s with MERT, brand new Lot 18s there with the Marauders. The skipper said, Mongo, where are we going for our training day? We going up to Alaska for a green flag? We doing a red flag? I said, no. Skipper, we need to go to Germany and fight the MiGs. And he laughed and thought I was joking. And I said, no, I'm dead serious. I've already called the German Air Force. They have a squadron of MiG-29s, and we can get there. I just don't know how to get two KC-10s to drag us across the Atlantic. But I sold him on it, and we ended up going there for 2 weeks. So the folks flying the MiGs, they purged most of the East German pilots. They had 3 of them. And the rest were Western. West German has been flying, they've been trained at Air Force bases, flying Phantoms, etc. for decades. It's Western pilots, when you work with NATO-type pilots, they're very near, if not the same, as U.S. pilots. So that part was easy. We went out there, we brought some Top Gun guys, we brought some VX guys to get into the MiGs and really see how our tactics, and we actually went out for our Hornet configuration. We flew no center line but 5 pylons, right? Folks say, why didn't you slick them off? Because if you go to the merge against a MiG-29 back then, the only thing you're going to slick are going to be your weapons and your center line tank. You're going to keep your pylons. And we basically looked to see how our systems look to identify the MiG beyond visual range and how we would perform in close in a pre-AIM-9X helmet era where they had the advantage with the Archer and their helmet-mounted sight. I would say that we validated all the tactics that were being taught at the weapons school, and we did quite well at the time. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
And, of course, Germany's fun, and we built a full weekend in there in Berlin at the Underground Bar.
Well, folks, that's all we have time for today. Thank you so much for coming out. Mert and Mongo, thank you so much for your time today. Director, really appreciate you hosting this event for not only VFA 81, Mert and Mongo, but also naval aviation as a whole. Thank you.
Folks, I think you'd agree that was a spectacular panel. Please join us next Tuesday at 11 o'clock Central Standard Time, 2 February, as we conclude our series on the MiG killers with the behind-the-scenes look at the restoration of the MiG killer F-18 Hornets. Thank you. Be safe.
If you're enjoying this program, please help us to continue to bring this unique content by supporting your foundation. The Naval Aviation Museum Foundation is dedicated to honoring and preserving naval aviation history. When you support our foundation, you're helping preserve these memories and educating our next generation of aviation enthusiasts. But we can't do this without amazing supporters like you. So please visit navalaviationfoundation.org/donate.